Hello, and welcome to the Winning in Professional Services podcast. My name is Scott, and I'm joined with Matteo Travado. So, Matteo, super excited about the topic today. I think we're going to be discussing thought leadership. So, I think it's really critical through some of the interactions I've had with some of my clients. I think it's really important to make this pivot from just thinking about your business and your business marketing to actually, as an owner, getting your profile out there more and becoming known in your area as a thought leader. So to get started on this concept, I want to first quickly define thought leadership. It is the process of establishing oneself as an authority in a specific field or industry by sharing valuable insights, expertise, and innovative ideas. So that is of course, sort of a wiki or Google definition, but maybe we can dig a bit deeper into that and maybe how we sort of define thought leadership today. So Matteo, do you have any take on what you think is the more important aspects of thought leadership to be effective?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the Google definition is what I think it's most common to even come across online when we hear people talking about personal branding and thought leadership. But when you're actually doing it, the idea of generating unique insights all the time may not be as easy as Google defines it. And so thought leadership may just simply be being able to, have meaningful conversations with people within your industry, whether they are potential clients or other business leaders similar to you in the same sort of heading similar companies as yours, and generally be able to add your own critical thought and opinion to what you're hearing from other people and then presenting it to your own audience. That could be easily considered thought leadership in my mind. And then obviously, you could develop more, I think, complex ideas if you maybe run independent studies, for example. Maybe you run surveys, and then from the results of those surveys, you come up with ideas or results that you could then present to your industry, to your clients, as unique pieces of information. So yeah, I think there's potentially a few different paths that we can take here, but generally for the quote unquote average business owner, I wouldn't go down the path of generating unique insights via surveys or studies, but rather being able to speak to other people within your industry and then kind of repackage a bit that information with your own personal take and opinions.
Right. Well, when you mentioned what thought leadership could entail, whether that's posting about things, whether that's being active on LinkedIn, maybe it's getting on stage, whether it's presenting at a chamber event, things like this, right? I think that one of the first objections that comes to mind, Matteo, is, well, I got to run my own business, Matteo. What are you talking about? You want me to maybe run a survey, maybe not, get out there and talk about things in my field? I don't have time for that. I'm running my business, of course, right? And so what do you say to that objection?
I would say that you still have a chance to have conversations even if you're not explicitly planning for those conversations. Say we have this podcast and we meet once a week and talk about different topics related to professional service businesses. Now, this could be considered thought leadership, at least it is in my books, but you don't necessarily need to have this type of activity scheduled or planned, but I'm pretty sure you have conversations with potential clients, for example, or other vendors, or if you are a fairly or mildly successful entrepreneur, I'm pretty sure you do have or go to networking events every once in a while, even if not every week, maybe once a month, once a quarter. you do have a chance to have conversations and exchange ideas with other industry leaders. And I think when you have those conversations, your brain is going to start, getting ideas from those conversations that you're having. And I think that's kind of the point, in my opinion, to be open-minded and then have sort of the, be a little bit proactive once you have those type of conversations and trying to think, okay, how can I, represent some of these ideas that I probably haven't heard before to my audience with my own personal sort of opinion to that. So maybe that can be, still one way to work towards becoming a thought leader or a thought leaders, quote unquote, without having to actively, think about creating content every day. But I'm curious to hear from you, Scott.
Right. Well, I think I will first state that there is a reason that we're talking about thought leadership. And in my opinion, I guess this has always been the case, but I think as markets become more saturated, or as, let's say, the economy, if it's not doing as well, and there's more challenges as a business owner to maybe get new clients, then I think it's more important that you're able to do some of these things like become a thought leader and become known in your field. I think it's more important that you do that. Otherwise, you're just going to struggle like everyone else. So you have to be able to do something differently. And the other thing is that in those difficult times, if you are a company and you are marketing your services as a company, you are going to be dealing with a very skeptical audience. So let's use the example of you're publishing something on LinkedIn under your company name. If you're publishing, hey, we offer XYZ services at this company, then most people are going to just scroll past it. They're not going to care because there's just some green or blue logo and some font, and it's just going to be noise to them. Whereas I think if you are a person speaking on a subject, yes, they may know you're the owner. Yes, they may not read your post or listen to what you have to say, but I still think you have a much higher likelihood of being listened to when it's coming from a person and not your business. And so that's where I'm saying this can be your competitive advantage, where if most of the business owners and most of your competitors are not speaking out, are not publishing, are not posting, are not creating any content, are not sharing their thoughts on a subject, well, then you are the one that is standing out more than them. So people make connections with people. Human connection is important. Publishing things as a human being is important. And let me tie that back to what you said, Matteo, which was around, as an owner, you're likely having conversations about business. You're likely having conversations about the things in your field. If you're in the tech space, you're likely having conversations about AI or about some security vulnerabilities or whatever it may be. And what we're proposing here is, instead of having those strictly privately, make some of them more public. Take the conversations you had at a networking event and create a short post about it. Hey, I had a great chat at the last networking event. Me and Jim talked about this, and before we knew it, it was an hour long, and we'd already gone deep down the rabbit hole. And what a great conversation! Whatever. Even just something like that. I know that's not thought leadership. You're not necessarily giving your take on things, but I think taking the things that were private, making them a little bit more public, is necessary in my opinion. And I just think that even if you're not an extroverted person that does this naturally, I'd highly encourage you to try to practice and hone your craft in this area, because the people that have their faces out there more are getting eyeballs that you're not getting. So do you have any thoughts on that, Matteo? Do you agree with me or disagree that this isn't so much of an optional thing to do anymore?
I would say you are right. I'd push back a bit on the fact that you need to do this to get eyeballs. I would maybe think of it also as a trust building exercise. You may not get the type of exposure that some of the most popular thought leaders, even I think at any industries online or any industries in general, has thought leaders that are very popular online, whether that's on X or on YouTube or on LinkedIn, what have you, there are for certain people that are way ahead of this game than you are. And the goal there isn't necessarily to catch up with them. I think for you working maybe more on a local level is just being able to show that you are knowledgeable enough about what you do, because then you have, when you meet people and people check out your company or your name online, they see that you have, created and shared ideas around topics related to your business, to your services, or to your products. And that, in my opinion, builds up more trust in potential buyers than if they came across an empty website or an empty LinkedIn page. So in my opinion, even if you don't necessarily do it to increase the number of people seeing your content in the first place, you still do it to build up that trust. When people don't know who you are, if you do some type of, say, cold outreach, then those people, some people may check out your LinkedIn profile or may look up your name on YouTube or on Google. And if something comes up, then maybe you have a higher chance of getting into some type of conversation with prospective clients than if you didn't have anything out there. So I wouldn't necessarily just think of it as, let's put out content to feed the algorithm so that I can get, eyeballs on my profile, but rather think of it also as maybe you have hubs that you can tap into in your local community, and then people will see that you have published content. Maybe it's a newsletter even. Maybe it's a short book or a long book. It could be anything that can show that you are an expert in your field.
That's a great point. When you emphasized that you're looking to build trust and not necessarily eyeballs, and I like that you also attached that to events that you might attend. I think, and sorry, you also mentioned, Matteo, that you don't need to compare yourself to the people that are the best in the business. And the way I look at this is, if you do have a newsletter, if you do publish something on a frequent basis, if you do get on a stage on occasion, I think one of the key goals here is to become known in your area as that XYZ guy, that IT guy, that marketing guy, that marketing gal, right? But if you're known as that person, even if it's in a small group, you are the person known for that thing. And I think that's what we're really talking about here. The person that has built up trust with that local audience or that regional audience, or that maybe it's not regional, maybe you are more of a going after a global audience, but in a very specific niche. But the idea is that you're known for something. Be a little bit known for something. You don't have to be the most famous person in the world. You don't have to invent something new. You don't have to come up with the most innovative idea. Because I do know that when we talked about the definition, being a thought leader was a bit of including this innovation side of things. But innovation doesn't mean you have to literally invent something brand new. Maybe it's just you have a unique take on something. Maybe your life experience means that you use a specific analogy that someone else might not use, that helps something click for someone. So we don't need to shoot for the stars here. Really, we're only trying to compare ourselves to ourselves. And if you're completely inactive and you haven't given any speeches on stage before, and you haven't had any podcast interviews before, and you haven't had any videos before, and you haven't had any LinkedIn posts before, well, then today your thought leadership is at a 0. Your exposure and building trust with people you haven't yet met is a 0. So our only goal here is to say, can we move that up a bit at a time, right? Can you go from a 0 to a 1? Can you start to slowly progress and get a little bit better at it over time? So that's really what we're talking about here with thought leadership, and we're talking about doing something that's not just cold selling, where you're just direct selling and you haven't had a chance to build up any sort of relationship with people or build up any sort of trust with people prior to that. So we talked a bit about why it's important. Let's maybe dig a little bit deeper again into some of the mediums and ways that you could do this. So, of course, one of them is LinkedIn. I would actually argue it really depends on your industry, though. Like, if you know that your audience is not hanging out on LinkedIn, then maybe you shouldn't be striving to be publishing once a day or once a week on LinkedIn for thought leadership. That might be not the best time spent. So this doesn't just have to be LinkedIn activity. In fact, maybe we take a step back first and say, before we think about the medium and the way you could do thought leadership, we should talk a little bit more about what you're trying to achieve. So maybe that begins with knowing who you're trying to talk to. And so if you have an idea of, you hopefully should know the area of your expertise, right? And once you know that and you say, well, can I narrow down a little bit? Who am I trying to speak to? Then you can probably start to formulate, well, if I want to be a thought leader to those people, I want to be known to those people in some way, then you can start to think, well, where do they go? Are they on LinkedIn, or do they go to local events, or do they do do they hang out in a certain online community, right? Then you can provide value to them. So do you have any thoughts, Matteo, on the best way to begin defining that market, or how to begin researching where your market stands so that you can have a sort of a thought leadership strategy?
Yeah, I think especially when it comes to B2B, a lot of people really believe that, their audience is on LinkedIn. I'd push back a bit on that. LinkedIn is definitely a B2B sort of network of people, but there's not always everyone in the B2B space active on LinkedIn. I would actually even think of LinkedIn more of a distribution channel rather than a channel where I create content. And I still believe that LinkedIn, in my opinion, I consider LinkedIn more of a short form content distribution channel. And rather to actually build thought leadership, I would try to focus more on long form type of content. So, again, when I think of long form, I think of things where people spend time sitting down at their desk or on their couch or maybe on their way to work, wherever they can actually spend more than, say, 5 to 10 minutes consuming certain content from you. And I don't think LinkedIn is that place. I think people that go on LinkedIn tend to actually use it very much like another short form social media platform like TikTok or Instagram or X, where basically the motion is to scroll rather than to consume. And it's hard when people are in that scroll mode to build trust and long-term relationships. So in my opinion, I would actually start by thinking, okay, where can I start producing content that is conducive to a longer-term sort of consumption time rather than a short-term consumption time. And for me, that's either long-form video content. Yes, we can publish long-form videos on LinkedIn, but I don't think that the average length or watch time on LinkedIn is probably more than a minute or two. So I would rather think of it as maybe where can I publish this long-form video content? And in my mind, the first place is YouTube. And then it's podcasts. And then there's written content, which is, it could be written on your website, or it could be written on a newsletter, private or public. But going back to your question, where can we find where our audience hangs out? I think it's a matter of researching and trying to see if there's conversations or if there's already pre-existing content that targets your audience in any of the platforms that I have just mentioned. Are there other thought leaders on YouTube that produce similar content to what I am planning on producing? Or are there other thought leaders on Beehive or Substack or these other newsletter platforms that are producing content and that already have subscribers to their newsletters? So I think there are ways to find out. On YouTube, you can see if there's people that have a certain number of subscribers. On Substack, you could see how many people are subscribed to each newsletter, and that can give you an indication of how many people are actually active on that platform for that particular industry. On LinkedIn, you still find people that are fairly known in, I think, in different type of B2B industries, less B2C. And then obviously you have other platforms, which I, again, personally don't find as interesting, like TikTok, Instagram, and even X. Although, yes, X can be interesting at times, but I still think it's very much a short-term content consumption type of platform. And then there's all offline type, hubs that I mentioned before. This could be events, this could be networking nights or networking events, conferences. Those are all places where I think it's much easier to find people that are related to the type of services or potentially interested in the type of services or products that you sell.
Yeah, a lot of great recommendations there. And I would say if you are a very location-based company, so if you service a local area, 20 miles of the office, 50 miles of the office sort of company, then I would honestly highly encourage local public speaking engagements. Now, you mentioned networking events. I think that can be a good idea, but I actually think it's better if it's almost not a networking event, right? Meaning that, let's say that I always use chamber events as an example. I guess they are networking events, but if it was something happening at the local arena or something happening at a PTA meeting, I don't know, like if it's anything where people are there and they're in need of the information, if you can be the person that provides them with the information they're seeking, then that's a great place to be. And I think it's sometimes surprising to me because I think we can live in these zones where we see, again, I'm going to use finance as an example. I studied finance. I know a decent amount about some, let's say how to save money, how, compound interest, all these just basic things, right? And just general investment principles. Now, I might know that stuff and I might go online and there are people that are really good at explaining that information to people. So there are a lot of these finance gurus or Dave Ramsey type people that are just fantastic, and I'm not going to compete with them. Now, to the point of local, if you now go to your local event, let's just say it's a PTA meeting or somewhere else, a lot of people you just talk to in person are going to have no idea about very basic finance principles or about credit card debt or whatever it may be. And they're not going to even know to look for that person that is really good at explaining it on YouTube. And so I think your advantage could be delivering the information that's already out there at a global scale that's being distributed to all the people that are asking for it, and instead delivering that information to your local audience that wasn't directly asking for it or didn't know to look for it. Right? So you don't have to be the best teacher out there, the best thought leader out there. I think what you have to be is the person who in your local community is speaking about that thing, right? Let's say another example being some of the AI stuff. So all the people that are maybe listening to this might say, AI, oh, AI is so, my gosh, there's been 1,000 webinars about AI. There's been all these things about AI. I get bombarded with AI gurus on all these channels, and AI is the worst topic ever, right? Because it's so saturated. And while I think that's fair online, I think if you were to go to whatever that group may be that has 50 adult human beings in the room, you're going to mention AI and they might not even know what it stands for, right? They have no idea what to be aware of or what to watch out for now that more AI like robocallers are out there maybe doing some scams. They're going to have no idea because they are just the lay audience out there in the general populace in your local area. So I again, just to double down on this, my main thing would be, to your point, like LinkedIn has a certain type of audience, and it might be needing short form information. You can certainly double down on doing more long form content and being a thought leader or developing some sort of report that's very useful that people are going to seek out and really just kind of sit down and like read and really appreciate. So you can certainly do that. But I think that another opportunity is going to the people that didn't know to look for it yet, and to get in front of them, and you're going to really blow their mind with information because they might not know the 101 level because they just haven't been seeking it out directly. And that's your competitive advantage, right? The gurus in the area are not able to knock on the door of your local audience. right? You have that opportunity.
Actually, one thing that is coming to mind is that you could, if there's no pre-existing group in your local area, you could actually build one yourself. You go on meetup.com or some type of local event platform and set up an event yourself, and then speak to those people. I think that could be probably the lowest hanging fruit there to take advantage of. I do see a lot of these very small local event nights happening pretty much anywhere in the world. And I think those are fairly underutilized. And like you said, Scott, I think that could be a very easy way to tap into your target audience and get to them to know more on a personal level, and they will get to know you more on a personal level, and just build more relationships through those local, more intimate events. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, when you said your personal experiences, that is really critical as well. I personally believe that when you're doing these thought leadership, yes, if you're able to publish stuff, if you're able to speak and present on something, I think that's great. But I would also layer in that personal side of things, if at all possible. I'm not saying you have to share a lot about your family or your kids or stuff that you're uncomfortable sharing, but I still think if you're able to share some personal experiences, some of the personal side, that's going to be better than just being a mouthpiece for your business where you're just constantly promoting your business. I think if you take a step back and you start talking about your personal life a little bit, or maybe what it's like being a business leader a little bit, or maybe a business challenge that you're dealing with when it comes to employee churn or whatever, showing some vulnerabilities and some personal experiences or how you overcame some challenges, I think that that's more important than just, like I said, just showing this pristine, perfect thing and then like publishing reports and saying, look, I'm an expert, and a person I often refer to as being a really good expert in this, and I've referenced many times on this podcast, but is Marcus Sheridan. One thing I really like about his LinkedIn is he comes across as a subject matter expert in marketing, inbound marketing, some of these things about pulling people in and creating good content. So what he'll do is he will occasionally publish something about AI and how it's going to affect marketing. Or he'll comment on people's posts that say, AI is not taking our jobs. And he'll say, but I think it is. I think, for this reason and that reason. So he's coming across as a thought leader because he is giving a take on something, given his knowledge in marketing and technology, and he's doing that. But then additionally, what he does, back to the personal example, is when he has a delayed flight, he might share a little bit about how his flight is delayed and how he thinks about it, and how he thinks about how it's an opportunity to leverage his time more, and how he doesn't get grumpy about his delayed flights. Or he has a road trip and he has something happen. I'm making some of the stuff up here, but I certainly see on his even LinkedIn profile, him sharing a picture of himself going through something in his personal life and sharing a bit. And it's not always, here I'm sharing about marketing, and by the way, marketing. Sometimes it's just him as a human being. Sometimes it's him as a business owner. And sometimes it's him as a business owner in marketing sharing his take on something about marketing. But I personally believe it should be a combination of those things, because that will help you build up trust with your audience, and it'll just be more enjoyable. You can be a little more genuine, right? Our goal here is not to fake it. It's to be a bit more genuine and to be sharing knowledge and sharing a bit about yourself, right? So let's just think about any tips that we have here, Matteo, for how to do this more effectively. And I guess I'll say almost an anti-tip or something that I think you shouldn't do. I think one thing I see people do is forcing in their business a bit too much. I think that we don't we want people to be understanding of where we're coming from and what we provide. I'm not suggesting you hide what your business is, but something that I've seen done sometimes is too much of a push for the business. It's like, hey, here's this thing, and by the way, that's why this service is so important. Oh, and by the way, that's how we help our customers. I think that's a little bit more of a using social media or some of these other things as just a push, where it's like, hey, here's this thing. I think there should be some level of a pull to it. I think there should be some level of you're sharing stuff, and it's actually going to make people want to engage and ask you more, rather than you sharing all of it or pushing all of it, and then they're going to probably want to scoot a bit away from you because all you're doing is you're pushing your business. So that's kind of one of those balances I think is important to strike. But do you have any thoughts on recommendations or things not to do, Matteo, when it comes to thought leadership?
Yes, one thing that comes to mind is try not to emulate people that are more successful than you in your same field or in other fields, and just try to do what they're doing, say, in IT for finance. In my mind, you need to be yourself as much as possible. This goes back to what we talked about before. And I think that only comes with practice and with repetition. Because at the beginning, I think the easiest thing to do, especially for a novice, is to try to come up or to find other thought leaders and try to do what they're doing. You mentioned Marcus Sheridan. I think there's a lot of people that try to emulate him, but they don't come across as genuine, because Marcus Sheridan is Marcus Sheridan, and he does it very naturally, and I don't think he's faking it or he is trying to copy somebody else ahead of him. He's just him. And if I were to just do what he does, I could probably try to do it, and I would maybe, put out some content. It wouldn't come across as genuine. It wouldn't sound as me. And I think the best thing you can do is just be yourself 100%, because people will resonate with who you are. And then when you eventually have a sales call or a meeting with those people, and you're actually the same person on those calls as you were on the video that you published on YouTube or other places, people will actually feel like, okay, they know you. But if you're coming across as a totally different person on those calls than you were on the videos that you've published, to come across as a thought leader, then there's going to be a little bit of a dissonance or mismatch there. So, in my opinion, just try to build up your own personal brand voice through repetition, and that just comes with time. I know for myself, I've been trying to, do this thought leadership thing for a couple of years, and I still think I'm not at the point where I've actually honed my own brand voice. I think there's still work that I need to do myself, but as I progress into this sort of practice, I learn more and more how I want to come across and learn more about myself so that I can actually be 100% myself when I'm talking to the camera or writing or any of those things.
I think that's really great. It goes back to this idea of being yourself, being genuine. And in fact, it's going to be less of a heavy lift when you do that, because you're going to be more comfortable in your own shoes rather than if you were forcing something. However, an area that I would slightly push back on is I think it can be very hard to get started, right? And if you're saying, okay, let's be yourself. Well, maybe someone doesn't know who their self is on camera yet. Maybe they haven't struck that balance of how do I make myself likable to where people want to listen to what I have to say, but I'm also being myself. And I still think a bit of a shortcut to this, it's a little bit like being an artist, right? Where I think that if you are given a blank sheet of paper and it's like, go do art, that's, I think, what it can feel like sometimes. And it's like, well, crap, I don't know how to do art yet. I haven't worked on this, how to be a public profile or how to be someone who's outspoken, or I'm more of an introvert or whatever, right? Well, I would actually say you might want to do some level of copying, to be honest. I mean, this is where my pushback would be, is do some level of copying because you find those influences you have. So for instance, let's say we were using the example of Marcus Sheridan. I think you should look at Marcus Sheridan's profile, follow him. Look at someone else's profile, follow them. Get a take for the things that you like. What do you like from some of these people? What do you like about how they share? And I think if you can mix and mash and say, I like how he does this, but I like how she does that. And I like how this, maybe as I'm thinking about the type of things I want to share, I kind of want to do like a little bit of this and a little bit of that, right? And so now you're starting to create your own take on something a little bit, and then you're able to experiment with it. So that's going to give you a starting point. Now, then what I think tends to happen is you don't want to be, I'm using a simple example that I think is more algorithmic based, so more the LinkedIn direction, which I don't believe is the only thing you should focus on. But I do think it's a good testing ground, because what it can tell you is you can get data from it. So let's say that you use a couple profiles and you're thinking about the direction you're going to go with your thought leadership take. Okay, so then you start experimenting, right? and you're going to put something out there, and it's going to get 0 likes, 0 views. The algorithm doesn't like it, the people don't like it, right? Because it's one and the same. It's kind of like if the algorithm, if people like it, then the algorithm's going to push it and you're going to do well. But if it doesn't, that's something for you to know, right? And then you put something else out there, and then something else out there. And when you have 5 or 6 or 10 or 15 or 20 examples of things that you're doing, you might eventually get one hit, right? And maybe that's the time where you were tired that day and you were super genuine that day, or you just woke out of bed and you did like a video of yourself talking really honestly about something, right? Maybe that's the one that hit. But either way, now you're going to find out where's that balance of me being comfortable in my own skin, but also leveraging some of the things that I know from successful profiles. And now you're going to, I think, start to find your own shoes, right? You're going to start to find what you're comfortable in. And I think then over time, you can start experimenting more. And I just imagine, I could be wrong about this, but I imagine a lot of people that have formulated this nice public profile to a certain extent, I think they've probably made some mistakes along the way. I think they probably weren't like that day one. I think it took a lot of experimentation to find their own stride. And so if you're able to get yourself out there more and experiment, then you're going to eventually catch your own stride, and then you're going to be able to experiment, and then you're going to be more yourself, and then you're going to kind of have yourself be one with your public profile, and then you're going to be comfortable in your own shoes. So I'm not suggesting that you copy other people, but I am suggesting that you start and you use some data to help you better understand what your market cares about and what your market likes. And the reason, again, I use the example of online is because then you can get this feedback loop going. And while you shouldn't be strictly following the algorithm or what is pushed there, I still think that can help you determine maybe that's the type of presentation I'll do. Maybe when I do my presentation, I'll use that same anecdote, right? Or I just think that's going to then set you up for better public speaking engagements. And then when you approach someone because there's some new conference coming into town, you can say, oh yeah, I have a social profile here. I have a bit of a following. Here's an example of a presentation I recently gave to a small team, right? And then you're able to now get on stage and present something that's a little bit more thought leadership oriented, that has some data behind it. So you're not jumping into the deep end without having some feedback loops going on. So that's my recommendation for order of operations. But I want to know, do you have any final tips or words of wisdom, Matteo, that you can share?
I mean, for me, it's more about just taking action and doing it. Don't be too afraid of getting judged, especially at the beginning. Most likely, very few people are going to see what you publish online. Again, use the online channels to, like you said, test your messaging, and then present what you think is worth presenting to a local audience later on. You will probably feel more confident once you have done it a little bit more in the comfort of your own room or office, in front of the camera. Maybe don't be afraid of the fact that people are going to flock over your page and leave a bunch of comments. That's probably not going to happen. Just be comfortable putting out content, and then iterate and improve over time, and then just go to a local event and do that as well.
Yes, I think we all have this feeling of we're going to put ourselves out there and we're going to get criticized or something else. But I think the worst feeling and the worst criticism comes when you start to realize no one's even listening, right? You're in a room and there's an echo and you're thinking, well, not even a single person listened or cared, right? And I think that's the tough reality. And I think that only changes with practice. And so get out there knowing that the first few things, videos, posts, whatever, are going to get probably 0 engagement. But that's at least, now you're starting somewhere, right? And you can only go up from there. So with that, we're going to end this episode of Winning in Professional Services. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do like, share, subscribe, do anything you can, because again, we're a very small channel. We're just looking to get some useful information, hopefully get you thinking about something new. So if you enjoy this, we really just want to keep on producing content that you find valuable. Please share if you have any topics you'd like us to cover. But with that, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for the time, and we'll see you on the next one.